Global Seminar. My name is Arianto Patundru, and I would like to start by acknowledging and celebrating the first Australians on whose traditional lands we meet and pay our respect to the elders past and present. We are grateful for the support from the Australian National University and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Today, we will discuss the April issue of the Survey of Recent Development that is forthcoming in the Bulletin of Indonesian Economic Studies. To those who don't know BIES, it is the premier journal on Indonesian economic development hosted here at the ANU. The journal publishes 3 issues every year, and each issue always starts with the Survey of Recent Development. The authors of the next survey are Bapak Manggi Habir and Bapak Siwage Dharma Negara, both of the ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute in Singapore. We are grateful for their availability to share their highlights of the paper with us. The paper is titled Prabowo's First 100 Days and Beyond as President, a security-focused economic agenda. As usual, we will have Q&A session after the talk, but if you want, you can write your question anytime on the Q&A box, not on the chat box. We will attend to them after the presentations or whenever I see fit. You can also ask verbally later after the talk. And finally, please also kindly respond to the little polling on your screen. We need it to improve our series. Thank you. And with that, over to Pak Manggi. Silakan, Pak.
Thank you, Acho. Good morning, and in Asia, everybody joining in Asia, and good afternoon for those in Australia. I don't know if anybody's attending from Europe or from the US because the time difference is quite uncomfortable, I suppose. Just to give you a background, Wage and I have just recently written the BIS survey, and we would like to share, as Acho mentioned, a few key points in that report. It has been quite a challenge to write the survey with so much happening after we actually finished writing it. Even during writing it, it was quite a challenge when we were trying to edit it because it kept on changing quite a bit. I'm afraid we haven't caught all that is unfolding today, but I hope it can provide a bit of a background to better understand more recent events. What I'll do is we've decided to split the presentation into 2 parts. The first part will be done by Wage. He'll be talking about the economy, focusing on a few key items, but the key 2 items that he's looking at is on the budget and on the trends of key economic indicators. I will follow with a review of the sectors, and we're choosing 3 key sectors which we hope represent a bit of the real sector in the economy. And then I'll talk a bit about some of the features of the new government. Over here, I'll talk later about this. And then we'll end with challenges ahead, which I think will be a very interesting part. And I think the Q&A probably will have a lot to discuss on the last issue. So let me now have Wage present the economic part of the survey.
Thank you, Pak Manggi, and thank you, Mas Acho. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar. It has been a great opportunity and honor for us, Pak Manggi and I, to do this survey. And thank you for all the feedback from our friends in ANU and in Indonesia, to give us a lot of important inputs for this survey. And as Pak Manggi already mentioned that it is quite challenging actually to write the survey because there are so many things happening. And we also know that during our period of survey, which is started from the end of September last year, until the end of February when we submitted our final manuscript, things has changed, and we experienced the transition from the Jokowi administration to the new government under Prabowo Subianto, and we also observed the announcement of the big cabinet, the government policy, and this gives some kind of response to the investor and the market. So what we observe during the survey period, basically we try to complement the previous survey that have been written by Cosimo, Mashita, and Kiki, and we try to complement and complete the second part of 2024. And we actually observed that the same kind of trends that they found during their survey, that growth prospect is a bit lower than expected. So while we all know that the government has quite ambitious growth target, but it seems like given a lot of challenge facing the economy, a lot of uncertainties, external uncertainties, and also domestic uncertainties, we observe that the target even to achieve 5% growth will be quite challenging for this administration. And then part of the problem is about the weakening of the consumption or consumer side. And this is, we all know that this is the key pillars of Indonesian economy. And we already see that the consumer spending has been weakened. And then also the budget, also part of the problem that bring investor worried about the widening budget deficit. And we also find that the downward trends of investment has been started since the announcement of the expansive cabinet of the new administration. So basically, investors see that they don't really see positively about the announcement of the big cabinet in the government, which later Pak Manggi will discuss more. So we look at the financial market, the stock market, and the currency market. They're all under pressure, which actually signal that investors are really worried about the economic situation in Indonesia. So let me start with the economic performance during the first 100 days of the administration of Prabowo Subianto, which started since the 20th of October when the Prabowo Subianto was inaugurated as the 8th president of Indonesia. And then a day later, he announced his cabinet and then announced some policy and programs of his priority. So during the 100 days of his first administration, basically what we see is that it's part of continuation of the previous government under Jokowi administration. So growth remains steady at 5%, but this is also expected to continue during that time. That was before the announcement of Trump's tariff in April this month. So all the growth seems to be quite okay during the first 100 days of Prabowo Subianto. But if we look at Indonesia potential as a country which rich natural resources and young population, it seems like Indonesia has missed its kind of opportunity to push its growth further. So if we compare the growth, GDP growth, with other countries in the region, Indonesia has been less dynamic. We see like Malaysia, Vietnam, and Philippines, they grow much faster compared to Indonesia. Of course, if one wants to compare with Thailand, maybe that's also difficult to compare because again the political situation and also the population, the aging population in Thailand is quite constraint for the country to achieve higher growth. But Indonesia, with so much potential, we see that there's much room actually that can be used for Indonesia to push its growth higher. And this is actually the dream of many policymakers in Indonesia, how to push growth above 5%. And there are many studies have been conducted and have been written, including published in BIS survey, to explain about this stagnant growth in Indonesia. So there are many structural challenges that has been raised, including the weak governance, the high cost economy, and then the cumbersome and long bureaucracy. The last survey before our survey raised the issue about low productivity. They use I-Core to show that the inefficiency in the economy. And then Mas Acho also write a piece on the protectionism that's also hindering the growth in Indonesia. And Pak Budi and Abdul Rahman write something about inefficiency in terms of fiscal spending. So the spending quality, that's part of the problem. But we can make a long list of what are the problems, and it seems like government already know what are the problem. Somehow the issue is that the action that the government trying to solve the problem is actually not effective enough to really deal with or address these structural challenges. So let me now move to the aggregate demand. If we look at this table, which is the component of GDP, as you all already know that Indonesian economy highly depends on consumption. So about 55% of all GDP is contributed by consumption. And if we look at the growth of consumption, it's relatively stagnant. It has been weakening. Some maybe argue that if we look at the statistic, it doesn't really show that the consumption is weakening. But if we talk to the businesses and we talk to the people on the street, they feel that the weakening consumption, the declining purchasing power, and the higher cost of living. So there's also debate about the middle class. Yeah, we may not argue about whether our middle class is shrinking or not, but the real fact is that the middle class in Indonesia is struggling. They cannot find the good jobs. They cannot survive with the rising cost of living. So some of them have to deplete or use their saving, and this has caused the phenomena in Indonesia. They call it mantap or makan tabungan. So high debt level, yeah, in many middle class now. And if we look at the other pillars of in Indonesian economy, investment, it also doesn't look good in terms of the ability to promote the overall growth. Yeah, it's stay around 5%. And this is despite all the government efforts to improve the ease of doing business, push for the downstream industry or EV industry. So we don't really see the impact on the investment. So again, this is back to the problem of the structural challenge facing our investment sector. And if we look at the government sector, we also see that last year was the election year. So we see there was rapid growth of government spending in the first quarter because of the presidential and vice presidential election. But then afterwards, we see that there's a declining in terms of government spending, which is can be expected. It's back to normal, and the government is also trying to reduce the deficit. So budget efficiency is now the priority of the government, and the concern of many of analysts is that this budget efficiency may deter investment and also consumption in Indonesia. And if we look at export and imports, last year was relatively better compared to 2023. Export growth is much higher, and imports growth is also higher. It signals that the economy or maybe the manufacturing industry is also get some kind of boost from the trade. But we don't really see that export can become the new engines for growth, given that the future challenge coming from the new tariff or tariff war. So another issue that we try to cover in our survey is about the fiscal challenge. And this is not something new. And for many years, we already talk about this fiscal challenge, the limited fiscal space in Indonesia. So we know that the new administration has a long list of priority programs. They want to increase this spending mostly to populist programs like a free lunch program, the free housing for the lower income household, and free medical checkup. So all the free programs require financing. And if we also considered about the expansion of the cabinet, that's also require financing. So if we look at these financing needs and we compare with the revenue side, then we see that there's an imbalance, quite significant imbalance. The government spending, according to the budget proposal for this year, will grow by almost 9% in terms of spending, mostly driven by central government spending. But then the revenue side only projected to grow by 7.8%. And we are quite skeptical whether this growth can also be achieved, given that some changes that I will discuss later. So in terms of the fiscal imbalance, we see that there will be a widening deficit to be expected for this year. And the current administration, Prabowo has instructed this using the impress or presidential instruction that all the ministries has to cut their budget, or it is called budget efficiency. And this efficiency will be reallocated to fund many of Prabowo's priority programs, and including Danantara, which is the new sovereign wealth fund that Prabowo would like to use to push for the economic growth. And later, Pak Manggi will talk more about the Danantara. But I think the key to our fiscal is clearly is about how we can increase the tax revenue collection this year. And if we look at this graph, in terms of tax to GDP ratio, Indonesia has been lagging compared to the regional peers. And if we recall that early this year, the government plans to increase the value-added tax from 11% to 12%. But then last minute, because of the public opposition, resistance, the business opposition, President Prabowo decided to cancel the value-added tax increase. And this is only applied to the luxury items. And this will limit the revenue collection under the new administration. So from initially the expectation that the new VAT policy will increase the tax revenue by around 0.3% of GDP. Now the expectation is that it's only a very small amount, only 3.2 trillion that the Indonesian government can collect from the luxury VAT goods. Yeah, and there's also program or policy to implement the digital system in order to increase the tax revenue collection. It is called the core tax system, which was launched early this year to improve the system registration, tax payment. But we heard the reports that many taxpayers are having difficulty in terms of accessing the system and even paying their tax. So this affect the ability of the government to collect tax until the first 3 years of this year. We heard that the tax office can only maybe collect tax less than 80%, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a challenge to collect tax. The system is under kind of reform, and also now the economy is facing a difficulty as well in terms of boosting growth and investment and consumption. So they're all related to the ability to collect more tax. And if we remember that Prabowo during the campaign also mentioned that he will create a new state revenue agency in order to increase the tax to GDP ratio. But then the recent development shows that this idea has been maybe put on hold. So there's no clear plan whether this new agency will be finally established. And given the tax collection issue, then what the current administration is trying to do is to cut some of the ministers' budget and then to reallocate this budget to Prabowo's priority programs, including in food and energy security. So what we heard is that this is just the first cut, and this will be followed by several series of budget cuts. And this already creates kind of confusion and also concerns from the not just ministry but also investor about the ability of the government to really work or operate in an effective manner. So Prabowo, as you can see from the table, has a number of priority programs, including the Makan Bergizi Gratis, free lunch program. The president has decided that from the initial plan, 71 trillion for the initial budget, and only target around 19 million. But now the president wants to increase it to cover the whole 82.9 million students all over Indonesia. And this will require additional budget, another 100 trillion. So what we heard from yesterday seminar at ISEAS about the Makan Bergizi Gratis, it has been quite challenging for these programs to be implemented. So until March, the ability of the program to meet the targets is only around 2 million students. And in order to reach 82.9 million students by the end of this year, it seems like a very challenging task. There are a lot of issues in terms of the logistics and also the ability of the institution or the operator on the ground. And if we look at the budget for IKN, which is the Nusantara's capital city, initially there was a concern that maybe Prabowo is not interested to continue this project, but then we also learned that Prabowo still wants to continue. Again, as what we already expect, that it will be continued, but at a much slower pace. So IKN received a lower budget, but it will be continued. The budget is lower compared to the Danantara, which is the new pet project from the president, and compared to the 3 million house program. So we see that there are so many priority programs under the new administration, while the budget, the revenue side is not that promising. So of course, the administration will need to rescale and reprioritize which program that should be maybe put forward. And this should be based on the multiplier effect to the growth and also jobs. So this is my last slide. So with what I just mentioned that about the fiscal space concern and also the weakening consumption, the difficulty in terms of getting more investment. So investor concerns is very understandable. The widening fiscal deficit is one concern. Like recently, Goldman Sachs already projected that the fiscal deficit may increase to 2.9%, so close to 3%, the limit. And there's also concern about governance issues in Danantara. Yeah, people are worried that Danantara will be very politicized and it cannot fund the economically viable projects. So investors are worried. And we already see that since the announcement of the big cabinet of Prabowo, capital has been flowing out from Indonesia. If we look at the stock market, it has been declining since October, yeah, the end of October. It has been declining, and in April, we see that it has even reached the lowest level, below 6,000 level. And yeah, we see that maybe these trends will continue given the ongoing uncertainties in the global situation and also domestically. And aligned with the declining trends of capital stock or capital market, we also see that the rupiah or Indonesian currency has been depreciating, yeah, since almost at the same time after the October inauguration. And rupiah has been reaching now the new level close to 17,000 per US dollar, which is the level that even lower than the level during the 1998 Asian financial crisis. So we see that the Bank Indonesia and also the monetary authority needs to build or restore investors' trust in the economy. I think they need to maintain the stability of the rupiah and also continue to provide confidence to the investor. And maybe this is the right time because with the current tariff negotiation, maybe Indonesia will be forced to do more reform and to deregulate all this regulation that becomes the bottleneck for our economy, our investment. So with that, I will stop here, and then I will let Pak Manggi continue to the next section on the sectoral performance. Over to you.
Thank you, Age. Let me talk a little bit about the real sector, and we chose basically three key sectors. One is agriculture, the other one is natural resource and manufacturing. And each sector we looked at an important subsector. So we have rice in agriculture, coal in natural resource, and auto in manufacturing. Now let me start with rice. If we look at the first quarter, I think in 2024, there was a bit of a low production in terms of rice. And at that time in the first quarter, there was also on the demand side, there was a very high demand because of the fasting month of Ramadan around March or April at that time. So you had a very, very big demand while supply was a bit constrained because of low yield, low production because of the long drought in 2023, a year earlier. So prices really spiked quite high. It went up about 19 to 20%. So everybody was a bit concerned. The government sort of responded quite quickly and imported rice, 3.9 million tons at that time, which is quite a high number. But the prices started to decline, and I think by the end of the year, inflation was controlled below 2%. I think I'd like to sort of talk a little bit about broadly the supply and demand of rice. If we look at the milled rice amount in 2024, it's roughly 33 million tons. And if we look at the demand, is around 36 million tons. So there's a shortfall of 3 million tons, around roughly 8%. And this was actually the shortfall was a bit higher than previous years. Previous years was much lower. And if we can see the percentage of production, and I'm talking about milled rice, the production versus the supply, we are already fulfilling roughly around 95% of demand. So we're close to getting quite sufficient. I think the concern that we have looking at the plan for boosting rice is the food estates. We think that it is a very costly exercise, especially with the budgetary limits that Wage has explained earlier. So maybe our suggestion is to focus more on looking and managing the gap. If the gap is relatively small, and we can easily import it from our sort of neighbors, I think we can just focus perhaps on intensification in rice agriculture rather than extensification. Intensification meaning trying to improve the yields using better seeds, improved irrigation, and so forth on existing arable land instead of trying to create new food estates, which is quite costly, not only economically, but environmentally as well. Let me go to the next sector, and this is coal. Coal is very, it's the cheapest source of energy for Indonesia, so it accounts for most of our energy mix, around 66%. It also is a major export revenue earner at 27.8 billion last year. They had quite a good year in terms of production. They reached 812 million tons, which is higher than the previous year. But on the price, we can see quite a drop from the peak in 2022, which is around $380 per ton, going down more than half. Now it's around 126 or 127 per ton. So production was good, but price was down. I think the problem with coal, there's several issues faced by coal producers. One is that they have They have limited time to really focus totally on the sector. I think everybody realizes that the cost of production of the coal is becoming more higher every year. I think the cheap coal is becoming less and less. Coal now is more available in more remote areas, so logistical costs are very high if one wants to produce coal. That's one. Second is the financing for coal is becoming more and more difficult. I think international banks have stopped providing financing for coal for the last 3 years. Even the domestic banks are getting a bit of the pressure, and most of them are reaching their limits on coal as well. So there's financing limits and there's cost issues. So I think everybody in the coal sector realizes that they might have just another 10 to 20 years more to try to see whether they can diversify to other minerals. Another issue is that there is a domestic market obligation where a certain percent of coal producers coal that is being produced has to be allocated and sold to PLN, which is the state utilities, at a subsidized rate. Another problem that they're facing this year is that the government is requiring export proceeds from coal to be placed in local banks for 1 whole year. So cash flow problems are going to be felt also by coal producers. So coal is going to be quite difficult this year. This requirement was actually last year already being applied, but it was only 30% of the export proceeds, and they were placed only for 3 months. But now the amount being held is 100% of export proceeds for a whole year. This is to try to sort of increase the foreign exchange reserves statistically to show that there is a little bit more available to help the government try to control the exchange rate going forward. Now, let me go to manufacturing, which is the automotive sector. In terms of the sector as a whole, manufacturing did reasonably well, but for autos, it was a bit of a challenge. If we look at the two-wheelers motorcycle, there is a little bit of a growth. We haven't reached the pre-COVID levels yet, but the recovery is happening, although slowly, in the two-wheelers. The four-wheelers have a bit of a problem. They actually dipped down last year in 2024. And I think car producers are having too much inventory and really trying to reduce their inventories as a result. So we see investment on the automotive sector actually going down in 2024. I think the only bright spot on the autos is actually the electric vehicles and the hybrids. Interestingly, the hybrids, which is dominated by the Japanese brands, are much larger in terms of its size, in terms of the market size. But the EV, which is dominated now by the Korean and the Chinese brands, is really picking up steam. Although if you look at as a percentage, it's still relatively low, but it is an area that everybody's looking at quite closely. Now, let me go to my next topic, which is a look at the government and try to see what changes have happened compared to the previous government. So let me go to my first topic, which is, I think Wage and I see that the approach that is being used by the government is sort of a securities approach, and looking at what is happening now externally, where the world is getting more protectionist, there are tariffs all over, at least potentially. Everything is being negotiated right now. The world is becoming more mercantilistic. Everybody's thinking about their own economy. Trying to be self-sufficient in key areas is quite understandable. But if you want to be self-sufficient, especially in fuel and food, the cost is extremely high. And given the budget constraints, I think it might not be advisable to really have such a ambitious goal at this point in time. I think on the fuel, it's a little bit more complicated because I think the CPO, which is being used for biofuel, which the government wants to expand, requires also quite a bit of land. And the issue of deforestation, the issue of land conversion and things of that sort is also quite disruptive and quite costly at this point in time. The other thing that we'd like to sort of highlight is the big cabinet that has been established. I think if you look at the reason for that is, I think the new government wants to appease the political parties that have supported him. And if you can see that the number of ministers, the new government has 48 ministers versus 34 in the last Jokowi cabinet. But the interesting thing is the vice ministers. You can see the vice ministers has really shot up from only 19 in the past cabinet. Now it says 56. So a few ministers have more than one vice minister. I think the interesting thing that we observe in the cabinet is that out of all the 6 supporting political parties that have supported the Prabowo and Gibran campaign, they have taken a total of 23 ministerial positions. And I think the interesting thing over here is Golkar has taken most of the seats. And this is because Golkar has, even in the past cabinets, always had the largest cabinet seats allocated to them, primarily because they have quite a bit of experience in managing the government going back to Suharto days. The next political party with large seats, of course, is Gerindra. Is Prabowo's party with 5, and then SBY's party Democrat with 4, and then PKB and PAN each with 2, and Bulan Bintang and Partai Sosial Indonesia each with 1. Now, 27 ministers, most of them are, that's the majority, are independents, non-party affiliated, and 17 actually came from the prior government. So there's a little bit of continuity on some of the policies. But the impact of this sort of ballooning cabinet, I think the big concern is on cost. And going back again to what Wage was talking about, the revenue on the budget doesn't look very good, while the cost is keep on creeping up. There is more cost because of more ministers and more vice ministers, but there's also coordination issues with so many ministers and vice ministers. We had 4 coordinating ministers in the last cabinet. Now there are 7. Now, so I think this is a bit of a concern, and I think the large vice ministers, the large number of vice ministers, many people are thinking that is sort of a sign for at least a potential cabinet reshuffle. They have at least people on the bench, on the backup. Let me go to my last item on the government, which is the new institution, Danantara. And I think the easiest thing to understand Danantara, it is a state-owned enterprise holding company. So all the state-owned enterprise will be placed under this new holding company. Initially, there was only 7 of the largest SOEs that were planned. This has ballooned to all the SOEs. I think the big concern over here is that dividends that used to go to the budget as revenue is now going entirely to Danantara. So there's, on the revenue side of the budget, is also declining not only on VAT, which Wage had mentioned earlier, but also on dividends from the state-owned enterprises. There's also the governance issue, which Wage mentioned earlier as well. It reports to the president. In the past, the dividends going to the budget had to be reviewed by Parliament. So there's a little bit of independent oversight. But in this case right now, Danantara reports directly to the president. And also on the board of management, there are ministers, 2 ministerial level people. One is the investment minister, Pak Rosan, and then there's the SOE, state-owned enterprise deputy minister, and then there's Pandu, which is a family of Pak Luhut Panjaitan. So the independence factor of what's that? The question is whether these two ministers would still be holding their positions, because this is such a important holding company, to have sort of another position to manage is going to be very, very difficult. We were wondering whether they might have to sort of let go of their ministerial position. This has not been clear yet, but this is one of the questions that a lot of people have been asking. Another question is that all the state-owned enterprises are now under Danantara. So the question is, what is going to happen with the SOE ministry? And that hasn't been also entirely explained. Then we have to try to sort of calm down the market. They have added advisory board, sort of foreign people, international people. Ray Dalio is being appointed as part of that advisory board. We have Jeffrey Sachs as well, and then we have Shinawatra from Thailand. So all these sort of trying to create a little bit more independence, but there's also questions on how and why these people are there and what kind of authority would they have. So this is an ongoing issue, Danantara, and I think the next writers for the next review would need to have a look, and hopefully there will be more clarity on how things will develop further on this issue. Now let me go to the last slide, looking ahead. I think the biggest issue when we finish writing this is the trade war, the tariffs that Trump in the U.S. has been instituting on a lot of its trading countries. It's an on and off thing. It's going up and down as well. So it's very difficult to assess right now what the outcome will be. But definitely this is going to hurt trade. In the extreme, probably it might lead to a recession, a global recession. And I think we need to prepare for that eventuality if that does occur. It's always a case that you want to plan for the worst and you hope for the best, of course. But I think what the government is looking at right now is looking at alternative trade links to ensure that there is more diversity. I think we in Indonesia and Southeast Asia might have to anticipate a flood of cheap imports from China as it tries to look for alternative market for their goods as well. We have already had quite a bit of job losses right now in some sectors which are feeling the heat on competition, especially in textiles. So these are issues that I think will be faced going forward. And I think what Wage has been hammering on for the issue on the economy is on the budget. I think we really need some clarity, and I think a budget revision should be done soon. So at least there is some signal to the market on what they expect the revenue to be, what they plan for the expense to be, what programs will be pushed, what programs will be reduced. But it's clear it has to be quite a bit rescaled and rescheduled. But I think it's going to be quite a challenge for this year, 2025, not only for Indonesia perhaps, but for all countries. But for the new government, it's going to be quite a challenge. I'd like to end over here. And I hope you have time to read our survey once it's out. And I'll return this to Acho to sort of manage the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Manggi, Mas Wage, for the very comprehensive yet lucid presentation. So let's open up for questions and comments. I see one question already and one hand there, two hands. Let's start with Pak Hal and Pak Budi Resosudarmo. There's also Ross. Let's start with three questions first. First, Mas Budi, and then Hal, and then Ross McLeod. Mas Budi, over to you.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Pak Habir dan Wage for an excellent and very clear presentation, and also a nice survey. We appreciate it. So my question is that I have a feeling that this survey actually showing a pessimistic on the Indonesian economy. However, a lot of stress is through the budget, through the fiscal. But it is not that clear. And when Wagi talk about cut, it is the total cut or actually reallocation of budget. Yeah, if it is a total cut, then it can be easily that the source of the pessimism is because of the total cut. But if it is reallocation, so the only argument for pessimistic is that this reallocation create a higher inefficiency. But it is not clear where the inefficiency is actually will come. What happened right now is that there is a reallocation from several relatively modern sector, particularly services, into an agriculture. That could be damaging the effectiveness of pushing growth. But if actually the multiplier of this spending is not as good if it is spent to the other sector, but it is not clear. And many actually suggest that sending more in agriculture might not be that effective on pushing growth, but on income inequality, could be much better. Yeah, so that kind of pessimistic probably need to be dig more. So I will ask other question when we have more time, but I let Hal to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Budi. Please hold on, Wage and Pak Manggi. Let's take three in one go in the interest of time. So now over to Pak Hal.
Selamat siang, kawan-kawan yang terhormat di Singapore. Great to see you, at least on the screen, and thanks for a fine presentation and a fine BIS survey. Question I've got is, we're now about to have 6 months of Prabowo-nomics. And I guess what are the emerging signs, what we can expect over the next 4.5 years of Prabowo-nomics? Seems to me we haven't really got a clear narrative yet of where it's headed, but we do have elements of a story, I guess, don't we? It looks like the fiscal situation is going to be seriously stressed, as you clearly pointed out in your presentation and survey. So much spending that needs to be done, but tightly constrained budget. Not clear how the fiscal situation is really going to work out, and we haven't even got on to Nusantara and other things. Then the Danantara issue still seems to be a huge question mark, isn't it? For the reasons actually, Manggi, you very politely alluded to. I mean, it's opaque. It's not really, are there going to be the checks and balances, the scrutiny which you'd normally have? Putting former Prime Minister Thaksin on the board, I don't think is going to be a game changer. And even the distinguished economist Jeff Sachs, with all due respect. And then you think about the way Prabowo responds to challenges. And again, it's not really clear where he's going, is it? For example, the Trump tariffs. So Prabowo said, we'll get rid of import quotas, as a means of, for all sorts of things, as a means of, ameliorating US discontent. But that sort of flies in the face of a lot of vested interests, and also the sort of economic nationalism line that Prabowo was clearly running during the election and after. So I guess it's a very big question, but what are we thinking about Prabowo-nomics and where it's going? Uh, Maybe mission impossible to answer that, but interested in your thoughts. And thank you again, guys. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, Sacho.
Thank you, Hal. Now let's invite Ross. Pak Ross, you're still muted.
Ye-
Yep, now
Yeah, can
good.
you hear me now?
Yep.
Thanks, Wage and Manggi, for your presentation. Let me just put out a couple of questions for you. The first one is in relation to Indonesia's poor tax collection performance. We seem to have been talking about this for decades. Hell would say this is a lagu lama, I'm sure. But I'm kind of interested. Maybe we should think about this a bit more carefully. Obviously, your presumption and everybody's presumption is that if Indonesia had a bigger ratio of tax to GDP, that'd be a good thing. Well, I'm trying to remember the two charts that you had, one of them showing growth rates across comparator countries, and the other one showing the tax to GDP ratio. And as I recall, Thailand had by far the lowest growth rate in recent times, but it also has by far the highest tax to GDP ratio. If I look at Vietnam, Vietnam was, let me see, I'm trying to remember. I think its growth rate is the best out of all of those countries, but its tax to GDP ratio now is not much higher than Indonesia. So I think there's a tendency for people who talk about this to assume that Indonesia will be better off, and presumably this means that Indonesia will grow faster economically if it has a higher tax to GDP ratio. Well, people like me who favour smaller government rather than larger government are going to argue just the opposite, and that Indonesia's pretty good growth performance over the years has not been at all inconsistent with a relatively low tax collection effort. So perhaps I'll just get you to comment on that. The second thing that I'd like to ask about is that you mentioned very briefly the policy of energy self-sufficiency. I haven't got a clue what that means, but I did notice that it was the third biggest expenditure item in your list. I think education was first, I forget what was second, and I think energy self-sufficiency was third. So how come Indonesia is spending a huge amount of money, or intending to do so, on energy self-sufficiency when, as far as I can see, Indonesia has more energy resources, mainly in the form of coal, than most other countries in the world? So perhaps you could just explain that to me, to us. And just finally, on the question of the shrinking middle class, this has been a popular topic in recent times also. But I'm very concerned about what is the definition of the middle class. Last time I heard somebody presenting on this, it turned out that the middle class encompassed people right up to about the 99th percentile in terms of income, which I think is absurd. So if you're going to be talking about shrinking middle class in this survey, could you please tell us how is the middle class defined, sort of what proportion of the population, and how close to the top 1% does the top level of the middle class go? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Pak Ross. Okay, Pak Manggi, Mas Wage, that's a lot already, so let's tackle them. Over to you.
Okay, let me try to do one by one. Maybe Budi first. You were asking about how, in terms of allocation of the budget, spending, as well as cuts, right? I mean, right now we don't really have information, very clear information on which is going to happen and what's going to be the impact. I agree with you that if we spend more on agriculture, we might not have the growth impact, but we do have sort of the poverty sort of impact on income equity. But I really think overall there will be the cuts will be overall. It's not only allocation, but there will be cuts on spending overall, and then there will be allocation as well on which ones will be reduced and which ones will be allocated to. But still, the total, I think, spending will probably be reduced. The question still is from, where is going to be the cuts and how is going to be the impact? We don't know yet until we get the information. And this is where I think the market is very uncertain because there's no clear information right now from the government. I think always in a sort of very difficult situation, we always want to hear from the government, even if it's bad news, what can we expect? And the government is not really preparing the market, even on numbers, for example. And that's a bit concerning. It's like, we're still okay, kind of. I know it's not we're still okay attitude. I really think that they're a bit worried about it as well, but they really need to start looking at, okay, this is what we have. This is the revenue coming in, and we can calculate the revenue ourselves perhaps, but we really don't know where the spending is going to, because that's their decision. I think it's easier to look at and look at the revenue side. But I agree with you. I think I don't really have an answer to be able to tell you where it is going and what the impact would be. I think that's on Budi. Let me try to address how sort of very difficult question. Economic nationalism is something I think you will hear more of. I think that is the way that I see it. Maybe Prabowo's sort of natural instinct is to control. I think the top-down kind of sort of decision making and the way he operates is also something that I think what I've been hearing is that the feedback loop, especially negative feedback going to him, is not happening, right? People are always worried about giving bad news to him, and I've been hearing also that access of information and even access to people trying to meet him is also being screened and very difficult to get. So it's a little bit worrying in a situation like this if he's not getting the right information. And so I think going forward is something, I think, how would you say it? Wage was mentioning about the technocrats. I mean, even during Suharto times, right? And there is some similarities where a military person is becoming head of state. But I think in Suharto's situation that he relied on the technocrats quite a bit on something he didn't really understand that much initially. I think Prabowo is a bit different. I think he feels he knows quite a bit. And this is what I worry about. And I think the feedback loop issue, I think, is something that we need to worry about. I really sorry, I can't really tell you what we can expect from in 4.5 years more to go. I don't think it's going to be. We were discussing with some of our interviewees who were asking, is it going to go back to Orde Baru, Suharto type situation? I don't think so. I think the economy is quite different. I think the sophistication of the market is also quite different. So he needs to watch out about that. So I really think the external pressures are going to be also quite important, which wasn't as complicated, I think, in the old days. So it's a little bit more complex. I'm just hoping that number one, I think if he can listen to more people, That makes me a little bit more comfortable. Right now, I don't get that comfort. So I'm with you. I still don't know how the government is going to move forward, to be honest. Wage, maybe you can help.
Thank you for the good question. Well, from Pak Budi, Pak Hal, and Pak Ros. Really appreciate that. Yeah, I think let me add what Pak Manggi has already mentioned. I think in terms of the reallocation, it is still not clear at the moment how the government reallocate the budget, but we agree with what Pak Budi said that if the reallocation is moved towards the sector or the spending that can create more multiplier effect, then that will be good for the growth. Yeah, but if it goes to sector that subsidizing like energy, electricity, or fertilizer, or even a free lunch program, free health medical checkup, then it will not contribute so much on growth, but maybe it will contribute to the equality or inequality aspect. So it depends on what is the priority of the administration, which is the goal for this reallocation budget, and we don't know how the government choose that priority at the moment. And this may relate to Pak Hel's question about Prabowonomics, right? What is Prabowonomics? People may guess, Pak Manggi mentioned about nationalism, resource nationalism, downstreaming, and more populist program like social protection. If we look at Prabowo's main programs, all are mostly related to improving the welfare of the people. So if we look at the free lunch program and then the free health checkup, housing for the poor, so it seems like he wants to improve the well-being of the poor household, but it still can be questioned later, right? Whether he really think like that. We may also speculate that Prabowonomics will be influenced by Prabowo's father ideology about socialism, because he is one of the maybe proponent of socialism in Indonesia. So maybe there will be more social kind of priority targeting to the well-being of the people. And I think we still don't know how Prabowo will implement various things that he mentioned in response to the current challenge, including the tariff, whether he knows how to deal with the current regulation, how to remove all the imports quotas or the remove the local content regulation, what will be the implication? So we also see that the tendency of the president is very reactive, just responds to what is the current situation, and then later on he will make a statement, and after that he will leave to the ministers to think about how to deal with that, how to achieve what his vision basically. So again, we see that there will be a top-down approach in which Prabowo mentioned or give a statement, and then he will let the minister to think about how to achieve that goals. And for Pak Ros, thank you for so many questions. All are very critical. I think we remember when you asked about this question about tax to GDP ratio, whether it is really important for growth. If we look at Thailand, maybe it is not really important, but if we look at other countries, maybe it is important. So we don't know what is the right formula or the right level of tax to GDP ratio, but I think for Indonesia, it will be ideal if Indonesia can increase the tax revenue, including the ratio, tax to GDP ratio, because at the moment the debt service ratio, if we compare to the tax revenue, is already very high. So without increasing the tax revenue, then we will have difficulty in servicing our debt. So tax is important. And also if Indonesia wants to continue building its infrastructure or any like supporting the social programs, then tax is the most important component for financing. And energy self-sufficiency, we don't really see the clear program here from the Indonesian Prabowo's administration. The self-sufficiency that Prabowo seems to highlight is to reduce imports of oil, reduce imports of gas, reduce imports of LPG. So, but that's not self-sufficiency, right? It's too narrow. And currently, as Pak Ros mentioned, that Indonesia has abundant coal. So in terms of energy security, I believe the administration will still consider to use coal as the key component for achieving the energy self-sufficiency. And for shrinking middle class, maybe, well, we should not return to the debate about what is the data, but yeah, I think some people use the World Bank data, which is basically cover the income from 1.6 to 9.4 million for the middle class. So it is about 3 to 15 times of the poverty lines. But yeah, we can always argue whether this is the right measure or definition for middle class. But what we try to raise in the survey is that basically middle class is an important pillar for Indonesian economy because we all agree that consumption is the main engine for growth. And this main engine will not perform effectively if the middle class is not strong enough in terms of their income level or purchasing power. So it is very important to pay more attention on how to strengthen Indonesian middle class going forward. If Indonesia wants to push the growth level beyond 5%, I think the key is to promote its middle class in terms of maybe providing a better job and giving them a better income level and maintaining their purchasing power. I hope that we answer your question, Pak.
Thank you. Let me now take three questions from the written questions from Q&A box. So Michael Gill asked, what has happened to infrastructure and skills development investment that Jokowi prioritized? And in relation to Danantara, Max Stratton pointed out the potential of conflict of interest, not just from government, but also from a private sector. He mentioned, for example, the CEO of Vale, Fabriani, is going to be the managing director of Danantara. Do you think there is a suggestion that she would resign from Vale? And then a question from Arizal Jaknanihan about Prabowo recent call for deregulations of trade and investment policies. How do you think this will impact the country's economic performance, given that the declining state revenue as you mentioned? So those three questions, please.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe I'll try with the what happened to the infrastructure and skill development under Pak Jokowi. I think infrastructure has been rescaled or maybe reduced in terms of the priority from the budget. if we look at the allocation to the Public Works Ministry has been cut by almost 80%, if I'm not mistaken. So we know that the priority of the current administration is not on the physical infrastructure, but more on the soft infrastructure, which is maybe human capital and institution. And skill development investment, I also have we haven't heard about the progress, whether the current administration will still continue with the skills development investment, maybe like Kartu Prakerja, right? The one that initiated by President Jokowi. We haven't heard any news whether the current administration will either continue, expand, or rescale. But yeah, I think we do hope that this kind of skill development investment will be continued because it has been proven that they are quite effective in helping the improving the skill level of the labor force in Indonesia.
Okay, let me try to address the Danantara conflict of interest. Agree. I think there is a definitely conflict of interest if you look at the names being mentioned, and the question that you pose whether they're going to resign or not from their current positions once they do get appointed into Danantara. That is what everybody hopes, because there's so much attention that needs to be done. That it cannot be done, split level, doing other things. That would be very, very difficult. But we'll see. I think that there's a lot of pressure going on. There's a lot of discussion going on. Not much information is coming out. So it's something that we need to have a look at. But I do agree that the conflict of interest issue is a strong one, and it really needs a lot of attention. It cannot be cannot be held by people with two positions. It has to be just one. A player cannot be a referee, right? A referee should be a referee, and a player should be a player, or else you don't get a good game. Let's put it that way. The other one, can't remember the third question.
It's on the recent Prabowo's call for deregulation. But while we're at it, let me add another related question from Arif Ramayandi.
Okay.
He mentioned that potential flip-flops in the policy decision related to this import restriction and then relaxation. What do you think about the unpredictability effect on the investor's confidence?
Yeah, well, I think investor confidence right now is very low for many reasons. I think the issue number one right now is what is going to happen with the tariffs. What is the impact of that? And if there's going to be a major global slowdown, how is that going to impact? So everybody's looking for a safer haven, and even for US dollar bonds. Yeah, people don't seem to see that as a safe haven as well, because the bond prices have really tanked, really dropped significantly, as well as the stock market. So it's a difficult decision. I mean, how deregulation is, what I'm trying to say is deregulation is not enough. I think it's very important to show that we're coming up with the right decisions, the right policies, and not only policies, but implementation. I think the problem that we're having right now is the policies look quite good, right? I mean, I think everybody, in terms of, let's say, the food, the makanan bergizi, the free school lunch program. We just had a discussion yesterday on this here in Singapore. And the interesting thing that I found was there is quite a bit of positive things as a result of food programs, not only in Indonesia. We discuss about this food lunch program in other countries, even developed countries as well as in developing countries. And the response was quite positive because the impact was quite broad. It goes beyond school children. It helps the economy. There is some small enterprises that get involved and things of that sort. But the question though is, can we implement it? Can we implement it well? You put a lot of money, but if you don't spend it well, I think that Wage was talking about the quality of spending. This government hasn't shown that yet, right? I think that is what we're waiting for. Even Danantara. I mean, there's a lot of questions about Danantara itself, but how is it going to be done? How is state-owned enterprise going to be put into Danantara? And they were talking about leveraging. You know, the issue is the valuation of these companies. The valuation of the publicly listed state-owned enterprises is much clearer, right? We have BRI, we have Mandiri, we have Telkom. We know what that value is. So if an investor looks at Danantara, at least for those assets, they see a value. But Pertamina, right? And you look at PLN, those are huge companies, but they're not profit oriented. So there's subsidies involved. So they're very government related. Can they compete, for example, without government support? And that's a big question. And the valuation of other SOEs as well. I don't think you can really leverage Danantara, to be honest. I think you have to rely only on dividends, the way that I see it. But that's my opinion.
Great.
Can I add?
Sure.
Mas
Wage,
Acho,
go
yeah.
ahead.
I think with or without the tariff from the US, I think deregulation is very important, right? So we talk about the investment climate. So we already trying to improve investment climate since the previous administration, but we don't see much progress in terms of investment climate and in terms of trade as well. I think Mas Acho write a paper on this protectionism. So I think this deregulation in trade and investment will still be critical for Indonesia, even without the Trump's tariff. So we still need to deregulate our trade and investment regulation. And the current negotiation is also very uncertain, right? In terms of how much import tariff that the US will later impose to Indonesia. So rather than focusing on how much tariff that will be imposed by the US, I think it will be more efficient for Indonesia just to strengthen our home economy, our domestic economy. So we will be prepared with whatever result from the negotiation, with whatever tariff implemented. Our local business will be ready, and we can compete with these many other products. The biggest concern will be what will happen when the Chinese goods coming to Indonesia. I think that may be the things that the regulation has to really think about how to also address that issue, right? The competition with the Chinese goods or Vietnamese products, Cambodian products. Yeah. So how we deregulate our trade and investment sector so that we are able to be more resilient.
Thank you. Let me switch back to direct questions. I see a hand by Indra Reski, and I also saw long questions written by Desi Pane and Denny Purbasari. I hope you don't mind asking you to ask them directly, Desi and Denny, after this. But first, Indra Reski, over to you. Yep. Indra, are you still there? No, if not, let's. Oh yeah, you're okay. Go ahead, Indra. You're still muted. Okay, now let's now move to Desi Pane from Bapanas. Go ahead, Desi.
Yeah, hello.
I'll get back to you, Indra. Now, let's hear from Desi
My voice
first.
clear?
Desi, are you there? You're still muted.
Hello, good afternoon. Is my voice clear?
Okay, go ahead, Indra. Hello, Lydia. Can we have Desi unmuted?
Okay.
No.
Given President Prabowo Subianto's establishment of ad hoc bodies, namely the National Nutrition Agency or Badan Gizi Nasional and the Danantara Board, to drive long-term improvement in national nutrition, human capital, and broader development goals, what institutional guarantees, fiscal frameworks, and governance mechanism have been put in place to ensure these entities survive beyond his administration rather than being dissolved with leadership changes? And it's supposed to be second question, secure and insulate their funding against global economic shocks, such as looming world recessions, so that their mandates in enhancing children's cognitive development, generational productivity, and Indonesia's competitiveness can be realized over the next 5, 10, or even several decades. Thank you.
Thank you, Indra. I see Daisy cannot ask directly, so let me read Daisy's question. I believe the first and the second question have been addressed, so let's just read the third one. Daisy asks, with the recent protest and demonstration, do you see any potential impact on domestic consumption or economic sentiment more broadly? It would be great to hear your thoughts on how the government is handling this and what kind of ripple effects we might expect. Next is Denny. Denny, do you want to ask your question directly? Denny Purbasari? If not, let me read Denny's.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you for the
good.
opportunity.
Hello, Denny.
Hello, Pak Manggi, Pak Arianto Patunru, and also Pak Wage. In your presentation, you highlighted a decline in the quality of policies implemented by the Indonesian government, which has contributed to increased fiscal uncertainty and a decline in investor confidence. I would like to ask you whether you have conducted any analysis or exercises involving the movement of leading economic or financial indicators that could help signal the probability of a future crisis. If not, could you kindly suggest which indicators should be considered in developing such a tool? In your view, are these indicators still reliable as a predictive instruments in today's context? Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Denny. So over to you, Pak Manggi and Mas Wage.
Okay. Well, thank you for all the question. I think for Pak Indra, if I can understand your question correctly, you asked about the institutional framework, right? The National Nutritious Agency, Danantara. I think this is already what is that set up with the law, or there's some legal framework to support the establishment of this institution. So with that legal institution, we believe that maybe this institution will continue to exist and maybe to perform their function. But we also know that in Indonesian history, when we have a new administration, we usually come up with new institution, and this new institution playing a sometimes similar role with a different name. Also can have another role. Yeah, I think in this administration we have several new agency. For example, the new, if I'm not mistaken, new Dewan Ekonomi Nasional, National Economic Council, and then there's also other council that advise to the president. Yeah, so there are so many agencies that involve in the policy making process. But again, we are still not sure whether this process is effective enough for Indonesian government to come up with a strong policy. And then the question from Desi on the protest. Well, thank you, Desi, for the question. I think investors are watching on the development in Indonesia. Like the protest is basically driven by unhappiness from the community, especially the young generation, about the practice of creating a certain policy in Indonesia, right? It seems like the policy is not really driven by the public or people's interest, but this is mainly driven by elite interests. So the interests of the political elites or the oligarch. So that create unhappiness among the public. And investors are watching whether the government will be able to respond to this demand, or in how the government response is also very important to maintain security and stability in Indonesia. So investor is watching whether the government will be able to maintain the stability and security even with this kind of protest. But in the democratic system, we know that protest is very common, and it's nothing really wrong. So it is a good channel for maybe communicating the public's unhappiness or concern. So this is actually good things.
Yeah, let me just a little bit add to what Wage was saying on demonstration and protest, because I think right now, if you look at the elections, I think Pak Prabowo knows that he was elected also because of the influence of Jokowi as well. So I think it is very important for him to be sensitive to demonstration and protest. And I think if he doesn't get the negative feedback loop from his ministers because they're a bit worried giving him the bad news, I think the protests are also a channel, as Pak Wage was mentioning. So I think protest is very important in terms of and see how the government responds. Whether they respond correctly or not, I think that's still what we're waiting to see. It's still in the early phases right now. There was also
There's one question from Denny, right, on the
about indicators.
Leading indicator for recession. Well, I think in economics there are quite many indicators that we can use to forecast the probability of recession, right? Including the unemployment, and then the the sales of the certain goods. I think Pak Manggi mentioned about the automotive sales. Maybe it can be one of the indicator. Industrial production, the PMI. So I think Bank Indonesia and Monetary Authority or OJK, they already use various indicators to assess the health of the Indonesian economy. And just be mindful that sometimes the indicators can also mislead us to certain opinion, right? If we look at the PMI, for example, it's very strong, but people are still complaining that why there are so many unemployment or so many layoff recently. There are many factories closed down. So we also need to match the indicators with the reality on the ground.
Yeah, let me add a little bit on some of that question regarding I think we need to really assess what is short term and what is long term. Policies, for example, like Makanan Bergizi, the school lunch program, that is a long term policy to improve the health, nutrition, as well as the impact, the spread effect of that. But if you're talking about shocks that we might face as external shocks, so those are short-term policies where the monetary policy and the exchange rate, for example, interest rates that have to be jacked up just to keep the rupiah stable and so forth. Those are short-term. So we need to make a distinction between those two. The short term is very critical when we're facing shocks, but I think the long term is the one that always is debated on how best to do it. Wage was talking about deregulation and so forth. That is also, in a way, in terms of the impact, would be a little bit longer term. I think the short term shocks is a little bit more easier to manage, and people tend to have a sort of similar idea on how to address that. It's a long-term item, so which is always a big debate.
Well, thank you, Pak Manggi, Mas Wage. We have 5 minutes past our time mark, so we have to conclude here. I apologize to those whose questions cannot be addressed this time, but I'll make sure your questions or comments can be forwarded to Pak Manggi and Mas Wage. But let me thank again the authors, the speakers, Pak Manggi, Mas Wage. Thank you again for your contribution to the BIS. And I also would like to thank the team behind this webinar, Lydia Napitupulu, Catherine Whitney, Tasarala, and Intan Sari. So with that, let me give this over to Lydia to close it. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you. Thank you, Acho.
Hi everyone, there's no announcement from me, but
Okay.
there's an event in Canberra. I think if you want to join, that will be tomorrow, is it? Yeah, okay.
Right.
Thanks again, everyone. See you in our next events.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone. Thank you.